Are you feeling exhausted and worn out because you are just trying to do too many things? Is your calendar packed full of mundane tasks and commitments that just don't seem to be taking you anywhere? I'm going to talk about some ways to get out of this trap and what you can do today to start making some changes. Welcome to Create Your Vision podcast. This message today hits pretty close to home for me. I have always been a very ambitious person with a full calendar, and I'm really not scared to take on a whole lot of things. In fact, I feel pretty accomplished at the end of the day if I can check off a huge task list. But what I've discovered over time is despite getting things done, is that I was still struggling with overall progress toward my goals and struggling with not feeling like I am where I should be. It's very frustrating. And I'm so busy. So, how does this make any sense? Because I'm busy. I should be producing things, I should be accomplishing things. So, what's the missing piece here? I generally think many people struggle with trying to do too many things and experience little results and a lot of frustration, like I just talked about. This is a very common problem for those of us who especially have a really strong work ethic and we would consider ourselves go-getters and the doers, but we just don't seem to be getting the results that we want and that we need. This is a big deal because there's a lot of things that we can sign up for that are in no way, shape, or form connected to our goals. And I believe many people make the mistake of believing that the main goal in life is to be busy. It's a trap. Busy is very, very different than being productive. I think it's easy to try to hide under a banner of busyness. It's a really big distraction. And for some of us, maybe that's serving us in the short term to avoid facing some things we just don't want to face. But we need to consider that it's what we're busy with that matters. So I want to dig into this a little. I want to take some time to explore and unpack kind of what I'm talking about here and some key issues that I've identified that are some common root causes of being busy, doing a lot of things, but just not accomplishing a whole lot. And the first one is maybe obvious to some, maybe not so obvious to some, but it's focus. And in order to get focused on tasks and projects aligned with your goals, the scope of your focus has to narrow down. You've heard the term get laser focused, or I think of a sniper even just looking through that scope. They're so focused. The scope of their view is so narrow that they just don't consider what's around them. I think of a racehorse with blinders on. That racehorse with those blinders on is not focused at all on what's going on over here. Firstly, because they can't see it, but there's a purpose for those blinders because it's keeping them with the end goal in mind, which is crossing that finish line. They're not getting distracted by the crowd, by the noises, by the other horses, by if somebody's a little ahead or a little behind. They are solely focused on where they are going and why they are doing what they're doing. And I think about when I started my own business, I was willing to do almost anything in the area of coaching and sometimes not even related to coaching to feel like I was getting started and making some money and doing some things to feel like I was succeeding. But what was I doing? I was not doing the work understanding what my true purpose was in the beginning. I knew generally what I was after when I started, but it was too general. I didn't have my focus in order to narrow my decisions. So I just would take on absolutely anything it felt like to be included, to validate what my business was. And after a while, I got really frustrated because I was chasing all these different rabbits around that weren't connected. They weren't in line with my long-term goals for the business. And it kind of left me feeling like I was failing at my business. And I know there's others out there that feel the same way because I've spoken to some of them in my coaching practice. It also really challenged my identity to a degree because I had to tackle thoughts of failure and confusion. Like it was a real messy time. And from a business perspective, I also really confused my potential clients because they didn't understand what I was offering and if they were even my ideal client. I really, really muddied the waters by not being focused. And what I realized was that I wasn't failing. I had to come to that realization, and that's an important distinction, but that I just needed to focus on what would help me grow using my own gifts, my talents, and to not make desperate decisions. That is such a critical time in growing a business in the beginning because it was a time for me to grow and understand who I am first and foremost and really, really dialing into what I was born to do, not what, Susie or Ted are doing, but what I am born to do. And sometimes that's a scary thing because it does take some alone work, but it's so critical. I know some of you have heard, I don't know if I've talked about it on this podcast, but I've certainly talked about it, shiny object syndrome. And I used to joke about it quite a bit, but what is that? If maybe you've not heard that term. It's chasing maybe the latest trend or advice making the rounds. It's the latest and greatest. And I see a lot of this happening in business as well. And the problem with this is that there's always a new tactic or there's always a new strategy out there to kind of pay attention to and explore. And there's nothing wrong with being current and knowing, some of the latest things. But if you're scrolling through feeds and scouring constantly other people's ideas, signing up for too many mini courses, joining a whole bunch of different communities, by the way, I'm saying this because I've done all of this. So this is very, very real. That's all of a sign, in my opinion, that you need to dial it back and explore what's already inside of you. I think there's a lot of searching that tends to happen because we're just not solidified with what we need to do, how we need to show up. And we start splitting our focus into a million different areas, thinking that somebody else has the answer to our problem. And that just simply is not the case. And I'm going to be honest. I mean, the struggle was real for me in all of these areas. And that's why I'm so passionate about sharing this message with you today. Because when I finally figured out what my focus was and what my vision was for my business, the specifics of that, the air cleared. That's when my confidence showed up. That's when I feel like I found more time in my day. That's when I felt a sense of peace as well. And that is huge. I know some of you, if you're feeling turmoil and confusion every single day, that's a big deal. So I can clear my calendar of things now that don't make sense because if it does not align with my vision, it doesn't end up on my calendar. And that's when I started to gain traction and results. If you're a visual person, when you think of spreading yourself out and how you want to use your time, if you spread yourself horizontally and keep things pretty surface level and try and do a million different kinds of things and do it all kind of on the surface, that's not going to yield you impactful results. But if you think of yourself operating vertically and keeping things very, very narrow, but deep, and going deep with the few things that you're supposed to be doing, that's where that sweet spot is. So that is a powerful visual. And I know that helps somebody because it helped me. The second thing I want to mention is trying to too many things can really cause indecision. I want to remind you, you were born to do your thing, not everything. And I also believe that indecision is an indicator that you may not have a super clear vision. Because when you know where you're going and you know why you are heading in that direction, decisions become very easy. It takes so much of the pressure off. And wouldn't that be a welcome change for you today to have decisions actually be easy or make more sense? It's like playing roulette with your life. You're not really picking the result, you're just tossing the dice, going with the flow instead of being really intentional. It's like following someone else's lead and they seem successful, so maybe I should just do what they're doing, but then you don't find any success in it. Well, there's a reason, because that's not the path for you. It's for them. You can glean information, you can glean processes and different things from what other people do and say, but you still have an individual responsibility to carve your own way. The third thing I want to mention is if you're trying to do too many things, chances are you're not finishing anything well or at all. And I'm going to ask, who is a great starter out there? And I'm going to put my hand up because, man, I know how to start a million and one things. I am one of those people, I am at the gate ready to go. Like, I'm an idea person. I can come up with a million different ways to do something. I never have struggled in that area. So I can start things really, really well. I have probably at any given time 10 books on the go. You'll see behind me, if you're watching the video, that I have a lot of books. And I like my physical books. I'm old school. But I'll have 10 of them on the go. I have so many tabs open on my laptop that it's hard to focus sometimes on any one thing. So this is an area that I'm still growing and developing in. But I found that if I start too many things, I'm likely not to finish any of them. And that has been a really interesting adjustment for me, because one of my values that I've identified is excellence. One thing I've realized is I can't model excellence if I'm not finishing what I start. That was an aha moment for me. So that gave me reason to adjust and start disciplining myself in this area. One thing that I've always kind of called myself over the years is a jack of all trades, or a Jill of all trades, however you want to put it, and master of none. And I kind of wore it like a badge of honor for a really long time. Like, I can do it all. I've got so many skills and interests, and especially as a single mom, that was even a bigger badge. I was a single mom for 17 years. And to be able to juggle a full-time job and different interests I had, and the school stuff, and just being a single mom, there was a whole lot I was having to manage. And I found that I'm so passionate and emotional about a lot of things. I can talk about just about anything with anybody and find an interest in it. And it's easy to want to maybe help solve a lot of the world's problems, because that's important. It's good, meaningful work. It's a good thing to do. But one thing I've had to ask myself over the years, is that my work? I'm meant to meet certain needs, whether it's in my business, my family, whatever, but I can't meet every need. And that was also a light bulb moment for me, because I can't solve all the world's problems. You can't solve all the world's problems, but there are some that you are meant to solve. You just need to figure out what they are and stay focused on that. So I never really slowed down enough to consider what I was putting my hand up to take on. That was kind of me. I would be the person that would jump up, put my hand up and say, I'll do it. Yeah, sure, no problem. Because I didn't want to disappoint people either. I was always the one that I thought people knew they could rely on. But it got to the point where it was to my own detriment. And that's when things started to break down. I was living really to meet the expectations of what everybody else wanted, but I was exchanging my goals for theirs. And that's when it really started to impact my life. And when I'd been doing it for a long time and started to understand that I just wasn't meeting my goals. And I'm talking about taking on a whole lot of these kinds of commitments without just pausing to see how it affects the rest of your life. That's a big moment to consider. So that's something today that you could start with, is just pausing and considering the commitments that you're taking on. And I want to add just one more layer of thought here to what I just said, because not everything is cut and dry. Like, there have been times that I've gotten involved in a project or a job because I knew somewhere deep down in my heart and my spirit that I should be involved. So it might not have made sense on my calendar, but there's been the odd time here and there that I just know this is something that I should be doing. So I'm somebody who prays and I consider things through that perspective. So I just wanted to make sure for my praying friends out there that I mentioned that, because that's important too. Not everything fits through a very logical lens. Okay, so what steps can you take today to start prioritizing what you take on? I'm going to suggest take an inventory of your calendar. What is it that you want to accomplish? Does your calendar reflect that? And are your priorities set? Or are you trying to squeeze in your priorities amongst your overcommitments? So you may just have it backwards. It could be a simple tweaking and making some adjustments. Now, you may not be able to do this overnight. This might be something that you have to work on, but the fact is you can start today by understanding what you've overcommitted to and what you can dial back. I want you to be fierce about protecting the time you need to invest in your future. You should be protecting it and nurturing that time, because that time is precious. We all have 24 hours in a day. Not one of us gets a second more than another. That's the one thing we all have in common. Being very intentional with that time is absolutely critical. And even with your calendar, I'm going to suggest remind yourself what's important to you. Take a sticky note. I have sticky notes all over my office here. You can't see them, but trust me, they're all around me. I remind myself what's important. So it can be as simple as that. Take a sticky note, put it next to your calendar, put it as a wallpaper on your screensaver, whatever. But remind yourself, keep it in front of you. I often say, write the vision, make it plain. And that means keep it in front of your eyes. So that might help you with reminding yourself, whoa, what am I committing to here? Is it in line with my vision? Does it make sense? And before you decide to commit to anything, it might take a hard stop and consider the consequences of the decision that you're making. With every decision comes consequences. Ask yourself, is this something I can afford to do? Is this a good use of my time? And am I really, really clear about the direction I'm going? If you're not even clear about that, I'm going to say that's a whole different topic. I can help you with. You can reach out to me through the website. But that's something else that's really important in this process. But those are great questions. What will you have to give up or say no to in order to take on this particular commitment that you're considering? When you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else, because you, again, only have so many hours in the day. So you want to ask yourself, am I saying yes or am I saying no to my priorities? I know that's a lot. You can re-listen to this, jot down those questions, and I would certainly encourage you to do so. They're all really important. So again, understand you were not born to do everything. You were born to do your thing. So what gifts and talents will you focus on developing? You may have been told over the years how multi-talented you are. You're so good at so many different things. And that's such a wonderful thing to hear when you get those accolades. I mean, that's a great problem. But the flip side of that, you may not find success because you maybe don't even know what talents to focus on. Maybe you're like me. I wanted to develop a lot of my talents. I'm very creative. I have a creative side. I'm a photographer. I like to paint. I like to do different kinds of things. And I had to put in perspective where all of these things fall in my life and the timing of developing them. So in my opinion, I found it's best to focus on the gifts and the talents that will help you walk out your vision. Focus on those. You can't focus on absolutely everything at all times. You won't lose your gifts. You won't lose things that you're good at. Maybe you just have to park it and spend a little less time in that area. But you can prioritize your gifts and your talents in order to reach your goals. Have you ever watched anyone successful trying to do everything? I kind of dug into this a little bit, and it made me think about Michael Jordan, one of the amazing, talented, successful athletes of our time. That's in my opinion. I think he's one of the tops for sure. And clearly, basketball was his sweet spot. But if any of you have followed his story, he decided to take a detour for a season of his life. He was going through some personal stuff, and he decided to focus on baseball for a season. And clearly he had, he was a accomplished athlete, so he had enough gifts and talents to get him on a professional baseball team. But he wasn't wired the same way for that sport. It was just so obvious. And so understanding what gifts to focus on will propel you into where you need to be. He went back to basketball because that was clearly where his ultimate gifts and talents were. And so it's just a great example to understand that he could have had some success on that baseball team, and he did, but his ultimate success was in the area of basketball, and that's where he had to focus his skills and his gifts and his talents. So what's important to you today? How packed is your calendar with commitments that maybe frustrate you and are not serving you? You have an opportunity today to stop, to evaluate, to decide, and narrow your focus to fulfill that vision for your life or your business or whatever it is that you know you need to start walking toward. I'm here cheering you on to the life that you've always dreamed about. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you next time.